And here we go. Welcome to the Expert Speaker Podcast. We are here with Vivian Meraki, somatic coach, author of the forthcoming book, Parenting Through Divorce, and divorced parent herself. Learned how to create a unshakable bond with her kids and now helps other parents who are going through divorce create unshakable bonds with their children. Welcome to the Expert Speaker Podcast, Vivian.
Hello, thank you, Majid.
So, how old were your kids when the divorce started?
My kids were young. My daughter would have been around three, between 2 and 3, and my son was around 5 and 6 when we started.
And I bet it was a shaky experience. You learned this word unshakable bond. So I'm picturing choppy waters.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So, what did you learn going through your own divorce and parenting challenges?
Yeah, I think that, the biggest thing that I think I took away was how much grit I feel like I had, and also how steady I can be. Um, it was hard, especially with children that young. I'll never forget that moment for me when I was realizing for myself that this was a decision that was coming forward. I never imagined in all my life, especially growing up, that I would be someone that would be considering divorce. Marriage was forever. You find that one person, you spend your life, you build your life, and you have a family. The happily ever after. And so in those moments, as I realized that this was something that was actually coming into the forefront of something I was needing to explore, that the first thing that came to mind was actually the children. Was But what about the kids? Are they going to be okay? I was actually sleeping in my son's bunk bed in the lower bunk. We're doing a sleepover night, and I could hear his rhythmic breathing that evening. And I myself, I was quietly weeping, trying not to wake him up, and just really realizing how did it come to this, and thinking I feel like I'm the supporting character of my spouse. I really believed in his dreams. I felt like I was really trying to support what he was trying to bring to fruition. He had actually left um, a pretty prestigious position and was building his own company and had really big visions for the future. And then also, obviously raising and supporting my children. And the thoughts that came to mind is maybe I'm just that. Like maybe I had always wanted to make a difference in the world. And I thought, well, maybe this is my way of making a difference. Maybe I'm the supporting character for my spouse and my kids, and I nurture them and they go on to live
Hmm.
their dreams, and
Hmm.
that's what we do. And as I said that to myself and said, maybe this is it. Like maybe we just resign that. And because the divorce might be too hard for everyone to go through, how selfish would that be? My heart broke a little bit more. Like it did not feel right. And so that was the start of that exploration. And the kids were young. The kids and I, at the time, my co-parent, like now co-parent and I at the time, figuring it out and talking it through in terms of how we would approach this. All in all, our divorce took, I think, longer than most people. We went through, it took almost 4 years to bring to completion. And for almost 3 of those years, we were actually cohabiting in the attempt to try to reduce the amount of strain and stress on the kids. And so for a long time, actually, it went really well as it can, in that context, as hard as it is. And things were smoother around those times until I moved out of the matrimonial home. And that was when things really, I think, from the perspective of parenting and with the children, it got really rocky. Obviously, there were moments within the context of, the negotiations and mediation and conversations with my co parent. We tried to keep everything as amicable and respectful as possible, but obviously are not always going to see eye to eye on things, hence why we would go through a divorce otherwise. But things got really rocky with the kids when I moved out.
Hmm. So there you were on the bottom bunk bed, having a sleepover with your son, coming to some difficult conclusions that I imagine are very relatable for people who've gone through a divorce. At some point, one of the partners at least has to have the idea to start the divorce. And even prior to that, could be questioning, who am I? What's my purpose? As you were, is this my role to be the support person? And then comes the conversation with the parents. Then comes the conversation with the kids. And in every parent's case, the question, what about the kids?
Mm-hmm.
What are we going to do with the kids? And how are we going to minimize the impact of this experience on that? I'm sure
Mm-hmm.
every parent has that thought at some point.
Mm-hmm.
And so you went through this process and you learned some skills, including something called somatic coaching.
Mm-hmm.
Can
That's
you
right.
explain what is somatic?
Yes. So somatic is a term that, in essence, is actually all about the body. It's all about feeling into the body. It's getting in tune with the aliveness that we are as people, as living organisms, and tapping into that aliveness. And from a scientific perspective, somatics is all about getting in touch with our nervous system, connecting it with the mind, because most of the way that we're wired actually is mind and body. It's not just mind. We've been really focused on the mind. We've been really focused on logic, being rational, predictably decisive around things, but we're actually really emotional people. And so a lot of what we experience is actually the way that we experience it is actually majority is through the body. So 80 to 90% of our vagus nerve network is actually wired from body to brain, and only 10-20% is brain to body. So we experience through the body, and then we transmit to the brain, and we interpret and we analyze and we do what we do. But a lot of the experience is actually through the body. And the body also retains those memories and experiences and holds it in different areas. But when we ignore it, suppress it, dissociate from it, which most of us were taught to, like a sort of stoic resilience and toughening up and that kind of thing, then we don't really have access to those reserves. So a lot of times the metaphor I often use is almost like a hard drive where you wouldn't get a large, like a phone with a larger hard drive with more memory room and space to store things and then get rid of half of it. And in essence, sometimes the way that we treat ourselves and the expectations we put on ourselves is actually that's what we're doing is we're actually putting aside half of us with the body and only tapping into the brain side of things. So the work that somatics does is actually tapping back into the body, connecting it all so it's all one system. And when we start to do that and really feel into it, then we have more access to that, what I call body intelligence. So more of that data, which feeds into emotional intelligence. And then ultimately we can make the right choices for us that feel like they align with us. And it's all
Mm.
about feeling through it first.
Feeling through it.
Mm-hmm.
Body. Very
Yeah.
interesting about that vagus nerves, having more channels going to the brain than from the brain.
Mm-hmm.
Mm. So, how can you help parents create an unshakable bond?
Mm-hmm. This is so I would the way I look at it is it's in two parts, I would say. It's not necessarily in consecutive order or anything like that, but it's that there's the work that we do with ourselves in solidifying for ourselves, and then there's the work that we do with our children. And at the heart of everything that I talk about, it's about creating an inner authority within ourselves and within our kids, because, and this is something that I talk about in my book, one of the most empowering things we can teach our children is how to trust themselves and that they can trust themselves. The second most empowering thing that we can teach them is that they can trust us. And they learn to trust themselves through us. And one of the hardest things we can do as parents, which is something that we're not taught and it's not normal, and, socially speaking, we don't do this, is that as parents, we almost have to change the way we do things by first trusting our children. And a lot of those things start from those the body sensations, the body knowledge, body intelligence. So things like, how much are you eating? Something as simple as eat till you're satisfied, eat till you're full. Are you done? Like how many times do we say, finish your plate. It's normal. Like finish your plate. Oh, you can't be full. You can't, you know, or are you sure you're sick? Are you sure you've got a sore throat? Are you sure that it's not that you're trying to get out of going to school, that you're putting it on, something like that. So these are ways that we can help. I mean, sometimes, yes, like sometimes that's what they're doing. And so, obviously we're using our best judgment as parents, but the foundation is teaching our children how to understand their own body, building that body awareness, building that emotional and body intelligence, and then owning it. So something that I practice with my own children and with clients is this exercise around I'm the expert. So my 6-year-old now says, Mommy, I'm the expert, right? I'm like, yeah, you're the expert. You're the expert of you because no one's
Mm,
more of an expert than you are of you. And then believing them when they tell us.
I'm writing that one down. I'm the expert,
Okay.
especially since I'm at expert speaker here, where my clients, they are experts. They're developing confidence, or perhaps they want to develop it more. I'm the expert. In fact, that's what my coffee mug says. Relax. I'm an expert.
I think I have one of those.
So, what does it look like when a child doesn't trust themselves compared to what does it look like when a child does trust themselves?
hmm So I'm actually going to use a story from my own life, a bit of a before and after, if you will. My children both went through some crippling anxiety after I moved out. And in those early days, they were still fairly young. And what it looked like was anxiety. Anxiety around what if something bad happens to mommy? If mommy leaves my line of sight, something bad's probably going to happen. And so I have to keep mommy in my line of sight, which meant that going to school was really hard, drop offs, and then later pickups, like just really needing to be regimented around the routine and the time and like down to the minute and being on time and building that trust with them. So, like I was saying before, the trust starts with us. Like we're building trust and then we help them build trust. And then over time, as we were building that trust and kind of routinizing everything and then working on the emotions, like what is anxiety? There's actually a movie that we watched together, which is called The Blue Beetle. People might know of The Blue Beetle. But in The Blue Beetle, without spoilers, I think I can talk about this part. A boy who's the hero encounters this blue beetle that has superpowers. And then in the very beginning, he can't control the blue beetle. And in many ways, my son loved this movie and we watched it together. And I thought it was really interesting with this movie. And so I tied that movie actually to his emotions and his feelings around anxiety, that in the beginning, our feelings sometimes feel like they're overwhelming and we can't control them. But our feelings actually can be a superpower once we learn how to control them and once we learn how to manage them and how to take on that power within ourselves. But it's going to take time. So the first thing is we get to know it. And the only way to get to know it is we feel it and we feel through it. But as we feel through it, what do we want to do with it? Noticing it. And a big part of this is building agency and choice within our children. And through agency and choice, we have empowerment. And when we have empowerment, and that's when we start to build, moving towards becoming unshakable. So this is a process that I supported them through. I also had signed them up for child therapy. So that was a once a week. But then what do you do with the rest of the time? Like however many weeks there is in a week, I think it's like 168 hours in a week, right? So 167 hours versus 1 hour a week. I know I'm being a little bit overgeneralizing because there's sleep in there and all that. But we having the kids with us, the people that have the children with us, usually parents, we have so much more time to spend with them around helping and supporting.
Hmm.
And so through that process over the course of time, fast forward, about a year later, my son going to school, he had a concussion at the time, so he had to miss some school, but he couldn't participate in some activities, so we had to make some special arrangements.
Hmm.
And what was notorious in that school is actually that the front office staff were not always the nicest. Sometimes you could arguably even say that they were even hostile towards
Uh-huh.
the kids sometimes, unwelcoming. Maybe that's the best way to say it.
Yeah.
And my son came home, threw his book bag on the counter, and he says, Mom, I want to tell you what happened today. I'm like, oh, what happened? His first day back at school. How was it?
Yeah.
And he says, well, I couldn't go for recess, so I had to sit in the front office. And all of a sudden I knew, like, oh, how did that go? Because of the environment. And he said, so the lady, when I walked in, said, who said you could be here? You know?
Uh-huh.
And then
Oh,
he
ouch.
and then he kind of hits. And then he sat down in the chair. He said, oh, my teacher, because I can't do recess. And then what did she say? She didn't say anything. She just ignored me the whole time. Okay. So how did that feel for you? What came up for you? He's like, oh, it's okay. It didn't even phase him. It's like, oh, some
Hmm.
people are just kind of mean. And then that was it. And then went on with his day and continued. So, such a difference a year later where we had such a forceful, very difficult situation where previously he probably would have crumbled. But a year later, in working through understanding his own feelings, understanding what someone else's feelings, understanding the differentiation between that, not taking it on, how do we emotionally purge, all of these more complex things that I think are even difficult for adults to do, he's
Yeah.
doing it. And in that moment, didn't even face him. Unshakable.
Well, that's amazing. And it sounds like best case scenario, silver lining of this whole experience is that your son and your children develop skills that they might have not otherwise developed.
Hmm.
Certain empathy, certain emotional intelligence, certain tools that you have been developing over the recent years. If there ever was a silver lining to any hardship, it's the and so it helps us become. Hopefully, it's a positive in the end. So, I've been drawn to your topic because I am a parent who has a co-parent. My kids were 6 and 4 when we divorced in 2020, it began. And yeah, I wish I had all the best skills back then, but you kind of you build the airplane as you fall down the cliff, something like that. So parents are very fortunate then to be able to find you at this critical time. And I suppose it's never too early to start building an unshakable bond with your kids. What do you recommend for people that are going through divorce or thinking about divorcing, or they're already well into their divorce and they're co-parenting with some challenges?
Hmm.
How can they get support?
Yeah, I think that there are a few forms of support. Obviously, one of the ones that we don't think often about is actually how we support ourselves. So, really noticing how we talk to ourselves. Oftentimes, we feel like a failure because the marriage failed. What I hear a lot is that there is a sense of loss of identity. Who am I now that I'm not a spouse? Some people who have been married for a really long time, the identity starts to get attached to that version of them. And without that, there's a vacuum and it feels like a huge loss. And it is. How we talk to ourselves and how we support ourselves, I think, is a big one. And recognizing when we need help. And then obviously there's friends and families. And I would say that apart from that, it's just noticing like how you feel around certain people. So if people walking away from it, it feels like my energy is less. I feel less than. I feel less good about myself. Then maybe those aren't the right people to surround ourselves with. And then finally, of course, there's people like me, coaches, and supports that are there to help, be almost like an extra gas tank, so to speak, where we can actually help to infuse more energy, more hope, more lightness, and actually, trusted methodologies in how to address these problems because we've seen it in our clients and we've seen it in ourselves. One of somebody that I was actually having a conversation with recently was saying that in their case, they went through their divorce and, um, it was 13 years that as they went through that process that they felt like hearing what I'm doing now, they're like, I wish I had you back then. Because like it's taken me 13 years to kind of approach the point that you're talking about where you're at with your kids. And when you think about 13 years and we say it out loud like this, it might feel a little bit abstract. But when we think about it in the context of our children, where if our child is 5, 13 years means they're 18 after. So all those years and all that, like those formative years as their brain is developing, social skills and also the bond and the relationship. I mean, fortunately in their case, they have a very strong bond with their children, but they were in their, what they were basically saying is, 13 years, if I'd had this back then, I would have been practicing that for 13 years, not, trial and erroring all the way through to now. So that's what I would say is there are different layers of support, and you will know best what's best for you, but you're not alone. And I'm here now. So happy to help.
Amazing. What's the best way for someone looking to get help now, or for someone who wants to read some of your material? I'm sure you're putting out, you've got your book coming out. What's the best way for people to connect with you?
So, in terms of material, I'm really active on TikTok, YouTube, Instagram. So, those are the best places to find the things that I talk about. And then the best way to get in touch with me is on my website, vivianmeraki.com. And there's a contact page there, and they can book to set up a call.
Fantastic. Vivian Meraki, parenting through divorce, creating an unshakable bond with your kids, somatic coach. Thank you for sharing your wisdom. Oh, I do have one more question.
Yeah.
If I wanted to build trust in myself,
Mm-hmm.
what would I do?
Mm-hmm. This is something I work with parents on as well. It's a big part of the process is building trust in yourself and helping to fortify your own identity. And sometimes it's a recreation as well. And I would say the biggest advice that I give people is start small. The way we build trust, it's similar to, the way we build trust with other people is that we have to do the things and then prove to ourselves that we're trustworthy. So if we make a promise to ourselves, we need to follow through. If we notice that something is aligning to us and we want to do it, then we do it. If it's not alignment, we don't self-betray and we say no to those things. But it could be as simple as, you know, um, I really feel like eating that food today. Or I'm going to commit to having lunch and not being on screens or not trying to work through like whatever that is for you. Or I want to like start getting back in shape, so I'm going to do 5 minutes of abs in the morning every day. Those small promises we make to ourselves, we do them, and we start honoring ourselves and finding those moments of joy, and start small and then start building up from there.
Okay, so trusting yourself is a matter of being clear on the identity of who you are becoming, and who you want to be,
Hmm.
including the activities that that version of you does, and keeping the promises you make to yourself to doing those activities, even in the smallest form, is how you're building this relationship and identity with yourself. And ultimately, trust is the shrinking gap between who you are and who you want to be, or who you see yourself as.
Absolutely. Yes. And the somatic part is the body mind alignment. So when we feel in the body, our body signals how we truly feel about something. We all have that niggly feeling where we might, we get invited to something and we really want to go, or there's a feeling like, oh, maybe that doesn't feel right for me. Building the trust in ourselves is honoring that feeling and saying, okay, I'm going to follow through on that feeling and not do the opposite of what it feels like because I'm worried about what someone else is going to think or being judged or being rejected. Is that we're more worried about letting ourselves down than letting other people down.
So, building our relationship with ourselves, trusting ourselves, is a matter of listening to our body when we're maybe doing things that we feel it's not really in alignment, and going, what's going on here? And realizing that actually we're doing it more for someone else than even for ourselves. And to prioritize ourselves, saying like, no, I'm consulting myself and doing what's right for me more often than I used to, because I used to prioritize other people's needs and concerns, and devalue my own.
Hmm.
What a journey. Well, I'll share this. One of my favorite questions comes from a book called Love Yourself Like Your Life Depends on It.
Mm.
And it's a question that says, if I totally and completely loved myself right now, what would I do?
Are you asking me what I would do?
No, I'm telling you, that's the question. If I
Okay.
totally and completely love myself right now, what would I do?
Hmm.
And so that gut check of like checking in, is this right for me? Is this prioritizing my need? I like that question as the filter.
That's a
Assuming
great
I totally
question.
love myself, what
Yeah.
should I do or what would I do?
Yeah.
All right, thank you. I'm happy to have that clarity about self-trust. Thank you for the work that you do, guys. If you're watching, if you're a parent, if you are looking to heal a relationship with yourself, with your kids, with your co-parent, Vivian's got you covered. Reach out to Vivian Meraki.
Thanks, Michi.
Thank you. Oh.